This is the extratime.com Friday podcast. I'm Oisin Langan. Hope you're keeping safe and well. Coming up, Ronan McNamara of extratime.com on Stephen Kenny's squad selection for the two World Cup qualifiers against Portugal and Luxembourg. Ronan was at the press conference. We kind of debate the options he has for the starting 11 and whether or not Aaron Connolly significantly weakens the squad by not being there. There's no doubt he has talent, but it just hasn't quite happened for him as much as we expected. Look, there are reasons for that. He's had injuries and that's pretty tough. But Connolly is a guy who we haven't seen the best of, and I hope we do get to see the best of him. Also, we'll hear from Derry City manager Ruardhi Higgins ahead of their clash with Finn Harps away in Ballybuffet. Mark Bircham will talk to us ahead of their game against Shamrock Rovers in the RSC. Vinny Perth, we'll hear from him following their 1-0 win ahead in the game park last night. That means that Drogheda kind of are now looking behind rather than looking in front. They're on 44 points with 34 games played, so they've only 2 left. Waterford are in 8th on 40 points, but they have a game in hand on Drogheda. They have 3 to play. Finn Harps are in the promotion relegation playoff spot at the moment on 39 points. Again, they have 3 games to play. Longford obviously bottom and gone. Derry City 4th on 47 points. They're 6 points behind Sligo, and they're 2 points ahead of Bows, who have played the same amount of games as Derry. Ruardhi Higgins was not impressed with his team on Tuesday night. We'll speak to him about that. We'll also hear his thoughts on the clash with Finn Harps. We'll also hear from Mark Bircham, the Waterford manager, who's finding it very difficult to plan for matches at the moment because he doesn't know who he will have player-wise. They have so many injuries. He's got a very sunny attitude, Mark Bircham. He's a guy that, and I only met him for the first time in person the other night, he's a guy you want to support. He's a guy that, you know, you want to get behind. I can see how the Waterford fans like him. I can see why they like him, I should say. And okay, it helps that the team have improved massively since his arrival. But there is something there's a bit of an X factor about him. He's got a bit of a personality, which is good. Over 1,600 supporters at the RSC on Tuesday night, which wasn't bad considering it kicked off at 6:15 and Manchester United were on the telly. And let's face it, those TV games always draw crowds away from League of Ireland grounds. Now, speaking of telly games, Damien Duff would have played many the TV game during his days at Newcastle and Chelsea. Shamrock Rovers as well. That's a little joke. But he has been announced as the manager of Shelbourne. So much of what he said has been debated. There's no real need for me to go back into it. But what I will say is his appointment has hooked in casual fans and even people who wouldn't consider themselves casual fans of the League of Ireland. Hopefully he'll stay for a long time. Hopefully he'll do a good job. As with any manager, we don't know what the future holds. And if he does, it will attract interest from people who didn't really pay attention to League of Ireland before. And what it will do, whether you like it or not, by the way, this is just my opinion. Feel free to disagree with me on @Oisin Langan. What I think it could do is add another layer of respectability to the league. And what I mean by that is, like, I remember I used to occasionally use a League of Ireland voice in a previous job on football. And it wasn't just about League of Ireland football. I'd use this voice or one or two voices. But the attitude I got sometimes was, well, that's a League of Ireland person. That's not really football. Now I think that attitude is changing. It's thanks to the likes of Shamrock Rovers and Dundalk and, you know, clubs that are doing their business very professionally. And I single out Dundalk and Shamrock Rovers there because they've gone on those big European runs and those long European runs. People now look and they say, okay, it is a respectable footballing entity, the League of Ireland. Like, look at the amount of players in the Ireland squad who came through League of Ireland. That sends the right message. And now Damien Duff being in charge of Shelbourne, that's another positive message. And if it works out, that's actually a good thing, that people will look at someone like Damien Duff and they'll say, well, he could have traded off his name for a decent enough good job in England. And I appreciate maybe he doesn't want to live in England because he's got a young family. One of the reasons he came back from Celtic apparently was because they wanted to move back home. But if it's a success, people will say, okay, you know, there's a proper football man. There's a guy who is in England who is doing it at the League of Ireland and in the League of Ireland. And that sends the right message. And he spoke about standards, which I liked as well. And I don't think he'll settle for second best. And it seems that Shelbourne structurally can match his standards, and he probably wouldn't have taken the job if they couldn't. And if they don't, I'm sure he'll have a word with them. But yeah, it's a positive. one thing that would worry me is that, if it ends quite soon, then that might reflect badly and people will go, well, obviously, the guy just wasn't interested because the league didn't take itself seriously in the club, the standards weren't amazing, and people will, even if those aren't the reasons, people who aren't massive followers of the league will think that. Whereas if he stays and he does a good job, you get the chance to grow the league and convince people, well, actually, this is a decent league. This is a decent competition to watch. I do feel an element of sympathy for Ian Morris, by the way. I know he left of his own volition, but he did a very good job. And as I said to Dave Donnelly, I think it was on last week's podcast, he's a guy I liked on a personal level. Anytime I met him after matches, win, lose or draw, good or bad, he always made time and his demeanour didn't really change. So look, I think we will see him pop up somewhere again, and I wish him the very best of luck, because I think he's a good coach. I think he's a good manager, and it must have been kind of strange for him this week, seeing all the talk about Damien Duff and Damien Duff talking about standards, and there are good standards at Shelbourne, and of course Ian Morris would have been part of setting those standards, and now he's not there anymore, having brought the club back up following a freak relegation. And it was a freak relegation. Like last year was just really, really odd. A bit like this season. Like, look how tight the league is. Right, we'll get into the interviews in just a moment. But first, let's talk a little bit about the Rugby Ireland playing Japan this weekend. The charge is that maybe we're still a bit too one-dimensional and we're not experimenting. And I heard Gordon Darcy talk about this on Off the Ball, and I think he wrote about it in the Irish Times. He actually, in fairness to him, mentioned Stephen Kenny and said, look at the difficulty in trying to rebuild things. So if Andy Farrell tries to employ a different kind of game plan and tries to make us a more skillful team, it can take a while and people don't react well to losses. Now, the Irish rugby team are lucky in a sense that they'll always have the Six Nations and they'll always have the World Cup. So they don't have to qualify for tournaments, and that's a big boost. But the Six Nations, like if they lose matches in that, you've seen how quickly people turn on them. So it's all well and good to say, well, Andy Farrell should try X, Y and Z. But we all know that if it doesn't work out or they lose 3 games, that people will turn on him. And look at it from the football point of view. Like Stephen Kenny has had a horrendous time with some of the criticism he's got. Now, some of the criticism has been deserved, but I think there was a lack of patience out there and people didn't understand that it takes a while to build something. And he had to do it during horrendous circumstances, granted. And now maybe we're seeing it, and hopefully we'll see even more of it in the games against Portugal and Luxembourg. But if you're Andy Farrell, maybe you're looking at that and thinking, oh, I don't know, maybe I'll just stick to what we're doing. We seem to be okay at that. We've beaten New Zealand. We get to World Cup quarterfinals. We win the Six Nations fairly often. Why would we need to change? But it is the debate that's happening out there around the Irish rugby team. We'll talk more about the game and get reaction to that game on Monday's podcast. Let's get into the interviews. Last night, Dundalk got the win against Drogheda. We'll hear from Vinny Perth in a little bit of a while. But first, let's talk to Ruardhi Higgins, who watched his Derry team draw 2-2 with Waterford last Tuesday night. He wasn't particularly happy with the performance. We talked to him about that and also the game tonight away to Finn Harps.
We came here wanting to win. Our plan was to come here and win. But our performance didn't merit a win, that's for sure. Waterford were really good. Their manager, Waterford's manager, has done an absolutely incredible job, to be honest with you here, and the response he's got here, and you can see the crowd getting. So in my opinion, I think we've done extremely well to somehow get out of here with a point, because I don't think it's a point, if I'm being brutally honest here, I don't think it's a point that we deserve, but we keep scoring late goals. It's a real good quality to have as a team, and which is huge credit to our players, but particularly second half, I thought we lacked drive and inventiveness, and hopefully it doesn't happen again.
Where does that come from, that lack of drive, that lack of inventiveness?
I don't know, and I'm not making excuses whatsoever. We don't have the biggest squad in the world. We can't rotate the way other clubs can, and it's probably, particularly second half, it's probably 45 minutes that I haven't really seen as manager of the club, and it's something that I don't really want to see again. But we've got 48 hours now to recover and be very meticulous in our recovery and make sure that we live our lives right, to go to Finn Harps and try and drive on and get a big 3 points.
Is that a good thing to have a game like that up next? Because maybe it concentrates the mind.
I think it's a perfect game for us. It's a derby. If you can't get up for that, then you shouldn't be in the game. So, as I said, we just need to recover well, prepare well, and try and go to Finn Park and get a huge 3 points.
Have you kind of hung everything on getting into Europe, or could it still be a good season for Derry, even if you don't make it for whatever reason?
Well, we've got ourselves in this position, so you may as well have a crack at it. But obviously, when I took the job on, when me and the staff took the job on, we were in a really difficult spot. We were bottom of the league, so if we get Europe, it'd be a huge bonus. But we've got ourselves in the position where, when the door opens, you have to walk through it, and we've got out of here with a point somehow. But the intention was definitely come here and pick up 3.
I was about to say hard luck tonight, but a draw here is actually not a bad result. Listen, best of luck on Friday night.
Thank you very much.
That's Ruardhi Higgins, the Derry City manager, following their 2-2 draw with Waterford. He's very steely-eyed. Like, you nearly have a fear of him when you're speaking to him. I'd never met him before. I'd never spoken to him before, and he was obviously quite irritated with his team. But he's not a guy I'd mess with. That's the vibe I get. Very good manager. He's doing a great job with Derry. Let's hear from Mark Bircham, the Waterford manager. Mark Bircham, Waterford manager. Good result or bad result?
Before the game, it would have been a good result for the injuries we've got as a team. But letting in a last minute injury time goal is always devastating, especially the way the goal went in. Corner, rebound, we've not attacked it, and they've managed to get a free shot in our 6-yard box to score. But really disappointing, but got to say, fantastic performance and effort by the players. You can see we're patched up. We've had, as our 4th game, let me count it. Is that 4th game in 10 days? Something like that. We've got, and look, we're getting on through 3 more injuries tonight. But we love a bit of adversity. We thrive off it, and we've got 3 games left. No better games than to have the champions here at home on Friday, where no one gives us a chance, and that's when we probably come into our own. So we're really, really looking forward to it.
In the second half, they had most of the territory, most of the possession, but you must have been pleased that you looked organised and at times looked very dangerous on the break and had a couple of chances.
Yeah, that was our plan in the second half. We knew we couldn't high press or press them the whole game because, as I said, it's our 4th game in so many days, as you can see with injuries. So our plan was second half to get on the counter-attack, which I think we did. I think we had more shots on target than them, so gave up possession, wanting to get critical breakaways, and everything worked to plan. We was in training this morning because we didn't know who was fit. So we trained this morning, we worked on that free kick that we scored from, so that's always best played. Everything went to plan except the really last kick of the game.
How big an issue is fatigue for Friday night here against Shamrock Rovers? Or do you not know yet how your team will be, what kind of options you'll have?
Won't know till Friday morning. Again, we'll have to see if we can patch the lads up. Credit to the lads, they keep coming, they keep going, and it's a big issue for us in training because we ain't got enough buddies out there. But when it comes to games, you can't fault the lads. They're putting their body on the line. I said to them before, if we lose every game from now at the end of the season, that's the worst case scenario. We're in the playoff. And that's what we would have bit your hands off for 3 months ago. But it shows how far we've come as a team. We want to stay up automatically, and I think we deserve to as a club, as a team. We all deserve that, and hopefully we can get it.
You are out of that playoff spot tonight. Does that count for anything? Does that give you a boost of confidence?
Massive. Yeah, massive. It's a massive psychological edge. To be fair, I thought Finn Harps would have won last night at home, and they didn't. They got the draw. So, as I said, it was important we got at least a draw, a point tonight to pick us out that relegation zone, because then our destiny's in our own hands, and that's all we want.
And finally, I don't know what it is, but you've managed to harness something out of this crowd. Have they managed to harness something out of you? You seem to like it here. You seem to like Waterford.
Yeah, really like Waterford, but just really like the squad. Like, we harness it out each other. I want my team to represent me. I said that when I first come in. I want a fit, organised side that want to work for each other and have great character and want to deal with adversity. And that's what they've done. And on top of that, we're playing some good attacking football. So, look, I'm trying to squeeze every last bit of energy and ounce out of these lads. And we've got 3 games to go to try and patch them up to get the job done.
And finally, there were 1,600 here tonight, which isn't bad considering it's a Tuesday night and it kicked off at 6:15. I'm sure you'd encourage everyone in the county to come here on Friday night, because the noise and the support you had tonight was immense, and I'm sure it does count for something on that pitch.
Yeah, definitely. And that's half as noisy as it has been for home games. If you look, since we've had the fans back in, we've won every game except 2 that we drawn. And they've been like, and it's a difficult loss to take, but again, unbeaten at home with the crowd behind us. And we clap Shamrock Rovers because they've won the league and they've done well, but we want to make it as hostile and as uncomfortable for them as possible on Friday. And hopefully we can do that.
Mark, best of luck.
Cheers, thank you.
Dundalk with the 1-0 win away to Drogheda in last night's Louth derby. Technically speaking, this is not correct to say, but I do feel that makes them safe. They're in 6th position. They're on 45 points. Yes, they have a game in hand on Waterford and Finn Harps. But can you see Waterford or Finn Harps winning 2 out of 3 of their games? I'm not sure I can. So I think they've done enough to avoid the relegation promotion playoff spot. Anyway, after the game, Vinny Perth spoke to reporters.
We've stuck together because even when the results weren't going great, we knew why they weren't going great. I mean, we were looking at casualty in terms of the amount of injuries. So, but the players knew why, and they were playing well, and we were losing games, maybe up in Sligo, where we played really well, and the whole noise around the Finn Harps conceding the 2 late goals, but we played really well and we were in games. And as much as we've lost too many games this year, no one has really opened us up of late. So for that reason, just being a good vibe in the dressing room, as I said. And a lot of senior players, by the way, be very important. The likes of the impact likes of Brian Gartland has had, and Patrick Michaeleni, Pa Hubin. His performances on he's been injured over the last 2 weeks. We've been struggling to train. But his performance before that was as good as I've seen any striker in the last 20 years. Them 6 weeks he had. It was as good as I've seen. Jason Bourne, Glenn Crowell. I'm not saying he's better than him, but the last 6 weeks he was so good on the pitch that I've never seen a striker have that rich vein of form in here.
This is the extratime.com Friday podcast. We're now joined by Ronan McNamara of extratime.com. Ronan, how are you?
Yeah, I'm all good, Oisin, and yourself?
I'm very, very good. Now, you were at the Stephen Kenny press conference yesterday for the naming of the squad for the doubleheader of games, Luxembourg and Portugal. Not in that order, of course. It's Portugal first, then Luxembourg. No real surprises, but there was a bit of a talking point in the shape of Aaron Connolly. For those who haven't heard and don't know the detail, you might enlighten us.
Yeah, so obviously Coleman, Alan Brown and Malumbi are back in the squad, which is to be expected. But there was no sign of Aaron Connolly yesterday when Stephen Kenny announced the squad. And according to Kenny, he says it's because of a heel injury, and Connolly didn't feel personally that he was going to be 100% right to join up with the camp this week. But at the same time as Kenny's press conference yesterday, Brighton and Hove Albion manager Graham Potter was giving a press conference ahead of the weekend's games, saying that Aaron Connolly is fine and it wasn't an injury issue as to why he wasn't picked for the squad. So it's, that's all a bit up in the air, and it kind of leads to more questions than answers, really. And I suppose for Connolly, we're all still kind of waiting for him to kick on from the sprightly young teenager that came on against Tottenham and scored 2 goals for Brighton on his debut, and who was in the Ireland squad under Mick McCarthy towards the end of his reign. I think Connolly's only scored 1 goal since then. So, for whatever reason, he hasn't really kicked on, and it isn't for the lack of opportunities. Graham Potter's been very good to him and given him plenty of opportunities when perhaps maybe he hasn't deserved so many opportunities given the lack of performances he's put in for Graham Potter's side.
I guess because he's a forward player, we judge him on goals. We know that there's more to it than that. And although he hasn't played much, and Stephen Kenny said it in the press conference that, he got 90 minutes in a League Cup game, and that was good to see because he hasn't played too many full matches for Brighton, whether he was injured or not injured. Like, he's a good option to have. And for an Irish squad not to have him to call on, it means it's a bit lesser. It means we're a bit weaker, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think just given the situation that we are in the forward position, and we're crying out for goals. And I know Connolly hasn't brought them. I don't think he scored for Ireland yet in his 8 international appearances. But, he still gets people off the edge of their seats. He still looks like he can make something happen. He's a very bright player, but it kind of seems if he doesn't kind of get going in the first, 20, 25 minutes, his shoulders and his head tend to drop a little. And then he can kind of just drift out of games, and all of a sudden, he's taken off the pitch after an hour, and you're thinking, oh, I forgot he was playing. That's kind of the way it's just going for him. Just needs a bit of momentum just to try and kick on, which he can't seem to get at the moment.
Yeah, and I hope that he does get that confidence or that momentum or whatever it is that's not quite happening for him, because he's very obviously a talent. Someone like Graham Potter doesn't give that much trust and that many chances to someone he doesn't believe can do it for him at the top level. And I actually still don't think people get how good you have to be to get anywhere near a Premier League team. So there's no doubt he's a talented guy, but one that is yet to spark to life, and hopefully it will happen. Stephen Kenny said something interesting in the squad, that he's happy basically with the midfielders. I could be misquoting him there, and I don't want to do that, but it was put to him that Gavin Kilkenny is playing well and he didn't get a call up, and maybe the person who put it to him was wondering why. Is that the right call? Should he be in the squad? Could he be in the squad? What do you think? Or the fact that Brown is back and Malumbi is back fit, does that really cover us? Do we need Kilkenny when we have those two?
I think there's an argument for it, but I was surprised when I saw him in the under-21 squad on Wednesday. I thought maybe Stephen Kenny might have given him the nod, considering he's been doing pretty well for Bournemouth under Scott Parker. They're flying top of the championship. But as Kenny said yesterday, Alan Brown and Jason Malumbi are back, and Alan Brown was excellent for Preston against Bournemouth the other night in the championship. So perhaps there is a pecking order there where Gavin Kilkenny has to start rising up. He also made the point about Jack Taylor, who's been doing really well for Peterborough this season. So he has to kind of try not get his way up the pecking order. I think people might have expected Kilkenny to be there, given that Harry Arter wasn't in the squad. But I think we are, pretty well stacked in midfield, and Jason Knight is back as well after that bizarre injury he got at Derby County with Wayne Rooney. Pretty much, just took him out of it in training, which kind of shows how things are going for Derby County at the moment.
Yeah, Jason Knight is a huge addition, isn't he? He's kind of exactly what we're needing and exactly what we're looking for. And if he can replicate the form he's shown for Derby for Ireland, then that's a big plus for us, because midfield is somewhere where we have been a tiny bit light, and maybe teams have kind of got through us a bit too easily there.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. He was excellent on that kind of right-hand side of the three in midfield when we played against Hungary in that friendly during the summer. And then obviously he got injured. And it's going to be tough for him now, whether he plays against Portugal or not. It's obviously going to be tough to impress against a side of that quality. And, going to Luxembourg as well will be a tough game, which I think he could start the Luxembourg game now, if I'm honest. That would be the one I'd say to bring him back in from the cold, give him,
really
60 minutes.
Not the Portugal game.
I don't see him bringing him in for the Portugal game now, to be honest, given that he's been injured for a while. He missed the last window, and I think the team against Portugal, Azerbaijan away, obviously not the home game, and the Qatar game, I think there's a nice team starting to build there, and I wouldn't disrupt that starting 11.
Yeah,
if I was Stephen Kenny.
But there's one change now. Again, it's very easy for me to say throw Jason Knight in, without saying here's who we should take out or here's how he should set it up. But again, just I was at the Serbia game, I was at the Qatar game, obviously watched the Portugal game on TV. You were in Portugal for that game, and I was just thinking, God, Jason Knight, that he could be the guy who's just what's missing here. And I wonder, do you put him in for Hendrick? I get that Hendrick probably is a bit more central, and he's the guy who zips the ball in behind, and look, he's played well, so okay, scratch that point. But I just think, do we need his industry, especially against a team like Portugal, when we're probably going to be without the ball for a long, long time, and we could do with that kind of work rate? And the thing is with Jason Knight as well, he's actually not bad to spray a pass from what I can remember. And again, I stand open to correction there.
Yeah, look, he's a very, very good footballer, great on the ball too, which is something I think in the long run we'll need. But I just think we have a little bit of momentum. I think maybe try and stick with that for the Portugal game, and then whatever happens with that. And like Hendrick, I suppose, has been the scapegoat kind of since Glenn Whelan's retired. Definitely been the scapegoat for those poor Irish performances, and he has been poor. But I have to say, in the last couple of games, last couple of windows, he's been very good for Ireland. And I think people are kind of forgetting that because they like to, just throw him to the doghouse if things go badly for Ireland. But Jeff Hendrick has been good. So I think that midfield of Hendrick and Cullen and McGrath is very, very good. McGrath has definitely been that. So was that Wes Houlihan type and linking the forwards and midfielders for us. So I think he should stick with that, Stephen Kenny.
Yeah, I guess if you were to put Knight in, you'd probably have to put him in for McGrath. And why would you do that when McGrath is in good form? Because Knight is probably a bit different to Hendrick in a sense that Hendrick would be more of a creative influence. Cullen hasn't done too much wrong. And again, maybe because he's on that kind of left side of midfield, do you really want to put Knight in there when he's been playing on that right side of the three, if that makes sense? So he doesn't want to unbalance things, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about keeping the team, I think, nice and steady for the Portugal game. Then again, it is, I suppose, nice to kind of have these selection headaches. It's been a long time since we've been talking about, bringing in one creative player in place of another. Like, when have we had that luxury in the last 5-6 years, to be honest?
Yeah, that's very true. And you know what? I haven't seen enough of Knight in the flesh to know exactly how creative he is. I've seen him on TV, whereas with Hendrick, obviously going to Ireland matches down the years, I think we all know what Hendrick is about. And he was excellent in the last window. He really, really was. Aside from that, I don't think there's too many debating points. I think the team largely picks itself. Even the formation largely picks itself for that Portugal game. At the very least, you go three at the back. Doherty maybe dropping back in that kind of wing back role. You could go with Knight on that right side. You could go with McGrath on that right side. McGrath did very well in Portugal. Bamidele, has done nothing wrong, so I presume he starts again, which O'Shea still out. So the team kind of largely picks itself with maybe just that one small debating point.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's probably the first time in Kenny's reign that there has been a bit of consistency in selection, and there's no real injury concerns. There's no COVID doubts, unless Callum Robinson gets COVID for the third time, which would just be ridiculous. But yeah, he seems to like Cullen and Hendrick in the midfield, with Doherty and McLean as the wing backs. And I think we're pretty well stacked in terms of the three centre halves, and of course Bazunu in goals. I think the question really is, who the front three or the front two are going to be. Does he stick with Ida and Robinson, and then that probably leaves a space just to the left of Robinson for maybe Jamie McGrath or Daryl Horgan, who he seems to like, and maybe Jason Knight could come in there too. You just don't know.
Yeah, well, I think we're probably going to get the same 11 as the 3-0 win over Azerbaijan, barring injury. That was Bazunu with Egan, Duffy and Omar Bamidele, Doherty, Cullen, Hendrick and McLean, then Horgan and Robinson and Ida ahead of that. Maybe you might put McGrath in ahead of Horgan, but then do you switch Robinson over to the left, or do you put McGrath on the left? Again, we could debate this all night, and there's probably people listening saying, no, this is what I do. And that's the great thing about the Ireland team. But look, we're in a good place going into those games, and hopefully we can get at least one positive result, because against Portugal, if we put up a good show and lose, you'd say that's fair enough. Portugal are that much better than us. But with Luxembourg, I think a win against Luxembourg shows we can compete against those around us, because I don't think Luxembourg are as bad as people think they are. And it's a well quoted line now, but the player who scored the goal against us was the only player on the pitch who was playing Champions League this season. And I think maybe there's a revenge factor. You'd nearly say, if we beat Portugal and do okay against, if we beat Luxembourg and do okay against Portugal, that kind of levels things up, and you nearly wipe that Luxembourg loss at the Aviva as being a freak and being part of the building process. And if we can beat them over there in this game, that kind of says, well, okay, this is where we're going. This is where we're at. We've now set the minimum standard. We're the project is working.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think when we look back at the end of this campaign, whether the FAI gave Kenny a contract or not remains to be seen. But we can definitely look back at the Luxembourg game at the Aviva and the Azerbaijan game at the Aviva, where we picked up 1 point from a possible 6. And if we'd taken the maximum 6 points from that, all of a sudden the group would look a lot rosier, even though we'd still be in third place. And I think third place is probably, where we were going to finish in this group, whether things went well or not. So I think a bit of perspective needs to be put in. Like, we are progressing, we are, going well. People can see that now. I think there is a bit of excitement about this Irish team. It's just that we shot ourselves in the foot really with the Luxembourg and the Azerbaijan.
You don't have to keep saying it, Ronan. It's such a oh God. I get shudders every time I think of it. And to be fair to Stephen Kenny, he has raised the point that there weren't fans in for the game against Luxembourg, and that did make a difference when at the end of the game they kind of push you on, as they did against Serbia. I was there that night, and it felt like the fans helped the team, and I think the team said that certain members of them anyway. Certain members of the team said that, look, that was a factor. And I think it genuinely is a factor in football. Just before I let you go, Eddie Howe has been appointed by Newcastle. It's a bit of a strange one, isn't it? Because they appear to be going after Emery. Emery is happy enough at Villarreal, or maybe he just doesn't want to work for Newcastle's new owners. I don't think we need to outline the issues some people might have with them. But Howe, he's been out of work for a while, and I wonder, is it a case that he wanted to stay out of work, or was he just waiting for the right opportunity? Now, this, to be fair, take the moral quandary of the owners out of it. This is a good opportunity because he will have lots of money to spend.
Yeah, I mean, it's a massive opportunity for him. I think everyone kind of assumed once he left Bournemouth, he'd walk straight into a job. For a couple of years, even during his time at Bournemouth, he was linked with the Arsenal job, regularly linked with Everton, and those two obviously didn't happen. So he's kind of become the forgotten man, I suppose, in the Premier League now that he's going to be coming back. And it is a big job for him, and it's a managerial saga that's gone on for far too long. Like, these owners obviously came in and just knew they were going to sack Steve Bruce, but had no idea who they were going to bring in. And it looked like Emery was going to come, but obviously he hasn't. He's staying at Villarreal to finish the job and try and knock Man United out of the Champions League. And like, Eddie Howe's come in. He's a good manager. He knows a couple of the players there. Matt Ritchie and Callum Wilson definitely won't be disappointed to see him coming through the door. And it's a weird one, though. He's going to be given a blank checkbook, and this is the man who spent, I think, a combined £40 million on Jordan Ibe and Dominic Solanke. So you could see all types of signings coming through the door at St James's Park. But I think it's an appointment that, like, this Newcastle team could still go down. People need to kind of get their heads around that and accept that. And I think it's a good appointment if they do go down, because I think Eddie Howe would know, like, he knows how to get out of the Championship and play good football in the Championship, which is a really, really tough league. I think it's one of the toughest leagues in the world to get out of. But so I think Eddie Howe will be a good appointment. Whether he can keep them up at the end of the season, I wouldn't be too sure. It depends on who they sign. That's really the elephant in the room here. Who's going to come in the door? But that just remains to be seen now.
And it's a tough sell because they won't have Champions League for maybe 2 or 3 years. They may not even be in the Premier League next year, as you say. So it's kind of an odd one. Like, do you get established stars who then they're only going there for the money and they're the motivation maybe not to win things, or do you go for kind of younger stars and hope that they grow in and you can grow the team? It's a bit of a weird spot that they're in. Like, if you buy Manchester United or you buy Manchester City, you're kind of going straight in at the top, whereas here the squad is so bad compared to those teams, and this presumably is where the owners want to take them.
Oh yeah, it's a championship squad when you think of it. It's a championship squad. I think maybe 5 or 6 of the players that played at the weekend were in the championship when they got promoted 5 years ago. So there's been no real improvement or investment in the squad since they've been promoted. But it's a weird one, because I remember when Man City got taken over they got taken over twice in the space of 18 months, I think it was. But they weren't attracting the big players outside of Robinho. I think they got in Patrick Vieira, which is obviously a big marquee name, but his career was finished at that point. So I think there could be, a little bit of that, get a big name, sell shirts, but they're not going to get anybody who's going to be really up for the fight, if you get me. Like, they're not going to get your Mbappes or your Haalands. That's a world away. And if you get these big stars, are they going to have the stomach for the fight to stay in the Premier League? I don't know. They might get a few on loan from the big European clubs that were trying to shift on a couple of stars, or they might get, the best players from the kind of middle of the road clubs in the Premier League. But other than that, I can't really see them getting too many outrageous signings for now anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Come here, just before I let you go, you write for Golf Digest Ireland. And I know at the moment you're covering Seamus Power quite an awful lot. how good is he? And the reason I asked the question is because I'm sitting in the very place where Seamus Power is from in County Waterford. He actually went to my own school. So I feel there's a personal investment here.
He really is really, really good. He's going to have a really, really successful few years, I think. He's only 34. He's coming into what's normally perceived as golfer's prime. And his form since he got his first win there at the back end of last season, it's been really, really good. He's only missed one cut. He's started the off-season with a 21st and 12th place finish. His iron play is absolutely superb. He's a wizard around the greens. Just needs to make a few more putts to really start contending at the upper echelons of leaderboards on Sunday. It's the only thing that's really holding him back. Like you said, a solid start now in his first round. I think he's 3 under par after round 1. He doesn't make many mistakes. Gets a lot of birdies. He really, really does. So it's all about just kicking on to the next level now, trying to push his way in towards that top 50. But that win is going to really change how he approaches the season. He doesn't have to play for top 10s or top 20s, not playing for ranking points just to get enough money to stay on the tour. He can start pushing for that second win. He's already exempt for the Players' Championship in 2022, already exempt for the PGA Championship in 2022. So he's really, really is set for a big year, and he's playing well enough to capitalise on it now, to be honest.
Okay. Listen, thanks for joining us, Ronan. That's Ronan McNamara of extratime.com and, of course, Golf Digest Ireland. Ronan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Oisin. Pleasure to be on.
Well, that's it for the extratime.com Friday podcast. As usual, on Monday, we'll have a bit of GA reaction. Lots of big games going on over the weekend. The Kilkenny Senior Hurling Final, Ballyhill Shamrocks against the Loughlin Gales. That'll be one to watch. I think it's live on TG Cahir on Sunday. Tomorrow, that's Saturday, a doubleheader of Dublin Senior Football Championship semi-finals. Usually I do the commentary on Dubs TV, but RT have swooped in and taken those games. So, I'm not bitter. But look, genuinely, it's actually great that those games are being shown on the platform that they should be. RT can give it a platform that Dubs TV quite simply can't, and that's just, because they are the national broadcaster. So it's great that the games are on RT. I'm up the north, actually, for Cliftonville against Dungannon Swifts, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm not sure if you've ever been to Solitude. If you haven't, it's worth going to. It's a nice ground surrounded by kind of an old housing estates, and there's a great atmosphere there. Like, it generates quite the noise, even if there's not a big amount of supporters. But certainly it's worth going to. The Irish League would have been seen as being well behind the League of Ireland, and I think it still is behind, but not well behind. But it's now a technically much improved league. A lot of the teams actually play on synthetic surfaces, and it means they move the ball around instead of just lobbing it forward. But look, I've covered an awful lot of games in the Irish League for BBC NI this season, and I have to say I've enjoyed pretty much every single one of them. That's where I'm off to over the weekend. By all means, if you want to tell me your weekend plans, you can get me on @Oisin Langan, or you can get us on @Extra Time News. We're back on Monday. Have a good weekend.